right, guys, just remember, if you are gonna go out on a hot 112-degree Arizona day when it's 40% humidity and eat a salt-filled beef stick, like the ones right here on my dangler pouch, make sure you've got a battle bottle with you so you can stay hydrated out on the range, because you do not want to be the one that passes out on camera, or God forbid, out there in the desert by yourself. We got the big ones, we got the small ones. Always good to have the battle bottle when you got a tasty range treat with a little bit of extra sodium in it. We've also got all that fitness gear, so make sure you check that stuff out at ironinfidel.com. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about, if you have one rifle and that's the only rifle you have, your sighting setup or optic setup, and what you may or may not want depending on your environment, where you're normally going to be shooting, and of course the purpose of that rifle, because there are so many options out there, you can very quickly get lost. Three things that I want you to keep in mind throughout the video is the distances you normally shoot at, the speed you need to shoot at, and if you would maybe regularly or somewhat regularly go past, say, 300 meters or 300 yards, because that's going to have a huge determination on which of these setups you're going to go with. And we're going to kind of progress through these from the up close setups to one that's going to be a little bit more distant. So let's go ahead and start off with a red dot like this EOTech, or a holographic sight like this one, or a red dot, aim point, or any other brand out there in the market today. There is a lot of really good stuff when it comes to a red dot, specifically when you add a little bit of a magnifier on there, whether it's a 3 power or 5 power. That gives you the ability to be a little bit more precise, get a little bit better hits out to that 300 and beyond if you've got the skill level. But there's a lot of real positives, and we're going to talk about the positives and the negatives here. So the biggest positives here on something like a red dot or a holographic is the battery life, specifically on the red dots. Most red dots these days are giving you 50,000 hours. Even stuff like the EOTech is giving you like 12 to 15,000. But literally on the red dots, your batteries are going to last years. These things are extremely easy to use. It's basically put dot on target and pull trigger, and as long as your fundamentals are there, you are good to go. They are durable as hell, well battle proven from the aim points, EOTechs, and several other brands out there. And the zero setup for a red dot is super easy, because whether you go with a 36, 50, whatever you want to do, from here to 300 meters, it's basically center mass, aim, pull trigger, and you're going to get a hit on that target. So it does not get much easier than that. But when you get past that distance, things can get a little different. Even with the magnifier, you have to understand where you need to place that dot to get a hit. Once you get past 300, into the 400 range, and then beyond that, gets really, really tricky. And the last really good thing about a red dot or an EOTech is, compared to some of the other stuff we're talking about today, they are super light. So you're not adding like a pound or 20 ounces to your rifle like a scope or an LPVO or something like that, with a big mount to go with it. So that leaves room to put your other accessories like a PEC 15, a light, whatever else you want on there, and you can get away with still having a decently light rifle. Now this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because when we start talking about past 300 meters or 300 yards with a 5.56, specifically with a red dot and a magnifier, this is where people's opinions start to diverge quite a bit, because there is a big difference between being able to hit a steel target at 350, 400 and beyond with a red dot and a magnifier, and being able to effectively deliver the muzzle energy or energy on target that you need to, say, take out a two-legged or four-legged animal, whatever you're dealing with out there in the world. So difference between having fun hitting steel and having effective energy delivery on target at distance, because when it comes to a red dot, most times you're going to see these on 16-inch and below rifles, which is not getting the maximum effective abilities out of the 5.56 round, but it's starting to get to the point where you're getting about all of the energy delivery you can. Much past that, and it starts to wane off about 150 to 200 yards max, depending on the barrel, up to an 18 or a 20-inch. But red dots, typically 16 and below. What are some of the negatives of a red dot? Depending on where you might use your rifle most times, if you've got a huge long range, or you live out in the country and you're usually shooting longer distances, 200 to 400 meters or yards, a red dot might not be the best option for you, because even though it is fast, it's light and things, once you start getting to a certain distance, that dot or reticle in there, like the EOTech, the Donut to Death, is going to completely start to cover your target. So that can be an issue. There's also no hold-offs in there. It's just a dot for the most part. Now, the reticle on the EOTech does have the ability to give you some ranging, and there are some dots that have multiple dots in them, or triangles or all kinds of designs out there that do give you some form of hold. But if it's just a straight red dot, there's really no way to have a defined hold in that reticle. You are somewhat limited once you get past that 300 yards or meters. And at some point, when you get to about 450, 500, it's a complete guessing game on where to hold your dot, depending on the size of the target. And if you guys are interested in anything that you see here today, I will have a full build list where you can do all of your own research on all the stuff that's been in the video today. That'll be the first link in the description down below. So moving on to the next setup, before we do, make sure you give some love to the Quantum Mark II from Blackout Defense with the AB over barrel ribbed for your tactical pleasure suppressor. But this is a very common setup today in not only competition, but modern law enforcement, where you have an LPVO and an offset red dot. Now, if you don't know what an LPVO is or what it stands for, it is a low power variable optic. So it gives you the ability to swing this thrill lever anything from 1 to 6 power in this case. Sometimes they go up to 10, and that gives you the ability to zoom in on target and get a far more precise shot. But there are some holdbacks to this, as we will go over. And then obviously you can have that red dot set in the offset position for those fast up close targets and have kind of the best of both worlds. If you don't understand the numbering systems on scopes or LPVOs, it's usually going to be a 126 by 24 or 1-6 x 24. What that means is it's a 1 to 6 power, okay? And then you have the 24 millimeter on the objective tube, which is the end here that I just flipped the cap on. That's your objective. This is your ocular, and that is what that number means. So you don't have to overcomplicate that, but if you didn't know, 1 to 6 is the magnification, and the last number, the by number, is the exit right there. So objective is always downrange. That's why they call it the objective, and then your pupil is always back here. So if you didn't know that, now you do. But let's talk about the positives of an LPVO setup, because there is a lot of good stuff, but there are some holdbacks, and a lot of people don't think about this when they're choosing their optic setup. When it comes to an LPVO, you can be far more accurate than a red dot, even out to really good distances of 300 and beyond. It's far easier to get hits at those distances. You're generally going to have some form of reticle, which can aid in designated holds, or BDC, which is a bullet drop compensation, set up in that reticle that literally tells you if you're at this distance, hold this one. If you're at the next distance out, hold the next one. Very, very simple. Since it is an etched reticle design, it'll always be there whether your battery is dead or not. It can definitely be easier on the eye, especially for people with astigmatisms. That way, if you're like me and you've got an astigmatism in your eye, your red dot looks like a big fly that got splattered on a wall or something. An LPVO or an etched reticle can appear much more clear to you, even if it has illumination on it. And the good thing about modern optics mounts, you can run an offset red dot on this, so you can still get those up close targets super fast and then transition right back to that magnification and take those longer shots. Again, these setups are extremely popular in law enforcement and the military, especially since you may have to take some form of hostage shot at a little bit of a longer distance, and you don't really want to do that with a red dot depending on the distance you're at. So an LPVO can be very helpful in an instance like that. However, there are some holdbacks. The first one being is you now have to deal with an eye box. So if you don't know what an eye box is, basically on this optic, there is a distance that your eye needs to be away from this. Otherwise, you're not going to see a clear picture. If you're off to the left, you're off to the right, too far forward, too far back, it's going to look really weird. You're going to have shadowing everywhere. So you really have to be in this perfect distance right here to use that every single time. So that is one of the biggest negatives of going to a magnified optic, is you're stuck having to ensure that your eye is very, very similar at the distance of that optic every single time. It's not like a red dot where you could be 6 inches away, 3 feet away, and you can still see the dot in the same place. Obviously 3 feet is a little bit of an exaggeration, but realistically on a red dot, you can be this close or you can be that far away, and that dot is still gonna look clear on that target. That is not possible with a magnified optic. The second big negative here is these can get extremely expensive. Once you start getting into the bigger name brands out there, you can spend well over $2 grand, upwards of $3 when it comes to a high quality LPVO, as compared to most red dots that are far cheaper. It is definitely heavier. It is definitely bulkier. You will have to buy a dedicated mount for this and set it up perfectly to your body. It is less forgiving in different positions or more difficult positions to shoot from, whether it's prone, kneeling, some kind of supported position. You got to be in that right position behind that to stay in that eye box. One of the biggest things I've noticed people transitioning over to an LPVO from a red dot is that false sense of confidence that they have better skills than they actually do. So when you transition to something like a magnified optic, you have got to do training to ensure that your skill levels are going to match the magnification that you can now shoot at. Because the farther you are away from your target downrange, you may just be a little bit off, but that is magnified the further that round goes. So if your skill doesn't keep up with that magnification level, you're going to miss a lot of targets, and you can't pull those rounds back once you pull the trigger. Now, where does this setup fit in where you have an LPVO and an offset red dot? Hugely popular in law enforcement, competitive shooting, and just everybody out there on the range these days. A lot of people have an LPVO rig like this, and it really does kind of open up the capabilities of your 14.5 or 16-inch rifle out there, because it allows you to take advantage of maximizing that round and getting it on target a little further out due to that magnification. Now, moving up to this last one here, the 14.5 Griffin armament setup right here. You can see I have a 3-15 Vortex Venom. That is the new one. And I have a hollow sun in the 12 o'clock position. And this is kind of going to be a Recce style rifle. As you can see, I got a bipod, dedicated suppressor, and all the bits and pieces on here. This one just does a lot. And this is kind of why I went away from LPVOs. And I want you to stick with me on this, because when you go to a full optic like that as compared to an LPVO, you're picking up minimal weight and size over the LPVO, but you are maximizing your ability downrange at further targets, whether this is a competition rifle, an all-around duty rifle, or if you want to clone a Recce build or something like that. When you get that full scope, it opens up a lot of abilities that we're going to talk about real quick. But the positives to something like this are you're going to have a better eye box as compared to an LPVO. You're going to be able to maximize the cartridge that you are shooting, whether it's 223, 5.56, the grain weight, you're going to match that to your barrel, the twist rate, the length, all that good stuff, and you're going to be able to get better hits, more accurate hits downrange, and at further distances. Again, that rifle is capable of 1,000 yards, but that is for shooting steel just to hear it report. You're not getting effective energy delivery to, say, harvest an animal at that distance with a 5.56. Finishing up on that accuracy, this 3-15 makes shots out to 600 and beyond easy and achievable. Past that 600, you're going to need a high level of skill. This, with the red dot and that 12 o'clock or offset, however you want to set it up, basically kind of gives you a jack of all trades setup, but you are going to pay for that a little bit in weight. It is a minimal size and weight pickup over the LPVO, but it is quite a bit over the red dot. You are, however, maximizing the versatility of a 14.5 or 16, and let's just face it, it makes your boys jealous and it makes your girls' knees knock. Now, what are those negatives of running a full scope and an offset red dot? Obviously, we've talked about it, that weight. You're going to have to deal with an eye box. It is quite a bit bulkier than a red dot, which are super streamlined these days and super small, down to like 20mm tubes. So there is quite the dynamic size pickup here when you go from a red dot to a full scope and then a 12 o'clock or an offset red dot. This thing does take a lot of getting used to when you have that dot that high, and then you have to transition back to a full scope, whether it's from 3 to that 15 magnification. And then the price, it just goes up, because all of this gear, the mount, the scope, the red dot, the mount for the red dot to go on the mount for the scope, you just keep adding stuff on top of adding stuff, and there is definitely a higher level of skill needed, especially at further distances, which means you're gonna have to spend money on training, ammo, and your time. Now, I know that was a lot to go through between these three different setups, and again, I don't want to steer you one way or the other. I need you to take into account where you are, where you normally use your rifle, the distances you use your rifle at, and what is it for? Competition, duty, fun, whatever you want to do, you need to choose your optic setup or scope setup or LPVO and offset red dot setup or magnifier and red dot for the environment that you mostly use your rifle in. I will say, however, for me at the point where I'm at, I'm trying to maximize my rifle builds at this point, which is exactly why I did what I did with this Griffin Armament Mark II, right? I want the ability to have full magnification. I still want the ability to use this up close. It gives me the opportunity to run a 14.5 because I am comfortable taking this out to 600 beyond which is why I have a lighter set of bipod on there, and of course that dedicated suppressor. So because this allows me to maximize the competition rounds or the precision rounds or defensive rounds I use on a daily basis out there, I want every single bit of performance I can get, and that setup gives it to me. And the reason I wanted a setup like that is because I go from everything up close, 10, 5, 7 yards away, all the way out to the 1,000-yard berm out here, and that rifle will do all of that for me. So because I do that a lot, that's the setup I want. If I was just doing stuff at the local range, CQB distances, anything inside of 300, red dot magnifier, maybe red dot LPVO, completely up to you. I just want you to get the best bang for your buck, and I don't want you to waste time, money, and ammo by choosing the wrong thing, by not knowing your environment and the distances you want to shoot at. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Check out ironinfidel.com. Get those battle bottles, because as you can see, I'm sweating like a stuck pig out here because it's 40% humidity and 112 degrees in Arizona. So get out there, have some fun on the range, and I'll see you guys on the next one.